Full disclosure before we get started. I reached out to the devs to get a copy of their game, Peripeteia, and they were kind enough to oblige. This won't change any of my opinions on the title, and take everything I say with a grain of salt since it is releasing into early access this Friday, so things can change. This isn't a full-on review since the game isn't actually out yet, but it is a great opportunity to at least try a first impressions type video. So what is Peripeteia? It's a first and third person stealth RPG where you play as a cyborg mercenary named Marie. It's being developed by a small Polish team called Ninth Exodus after a very successful Kickstarter. The studio is drawing heavily from Ion Storm, the guys who worked on Deus Ex and the Thief franchises, and Looking Glass Studios, who made System Shock. If you know those other two studios, then you know what kind of game they're trying to make here. It's an MSim, taking elements from the franchises I just mentioned and others for an experience akin to the classics while throwing a new spin on it here and there. The core gameplay loop is the same, however. You're placed into a map with a few objectives and are let loose to either explore it and find unique ways to finish the level, or beeline it and only complete what's pertinent. The game gives you a fair amount of tools to accomplish this. Being a cyborg, you have access to mods that enhance your speed and jump height, give you night vision, and allows you to use a drone to scope out an area before you go into it. These all cost energy, and refills can be found throughout the levels. At the start of the game, you're given the choice of an additional mod of your choice. These can be bullet time, possessing enemies, and straight up invisibility, but after the first level you don't get any more freebies, so you're on your own. There's also a bit of weapon customization, like attaching silencers and such, which is neat, but again, you don't carry anything over from previous levels. Now that could be a bug I ran into, but man, it's a pretty bad feeling, and I hope it really is a bug and not how the game is built. If you don't feel like going in all guns blazing, surprisingly there's parkour elements in the title as well. Since I mentioned parkour, let's talk about the level design, which will honestly make it or break it for most people. As for myself, I'm a bit mixed on it, and I'll explain why in just a second. All of the available levels in the game are massive, which is typically a good thing, especially in an MSim. The issue is that the levels kind of feel empty at times. That's not me saying there aren't NPCs who will help you along the way, because they do exist, but the levels just don't feel lived in. The thing that will either make a ton of people happy or angry is the fact that there are no objective markers, making it to where you really have to pay attention to the levels themselves and where NPCs are. This isn't even an option for you to turn on and off. This is straight up how the game is designed, which is why I'm a bit mixed on how I feel about the level design. I like the idea of not having my hand held with every objective in the game, but at the same time, it's entirely possible to miss a vital piece of information from a hidden NPC because you never ran into them, which is really what an MSim is all about. Gathering all available information to the best of your ability, formulating a plan, and executing. Here though, I think if the levels had just a bit more presence rather than feeling like empty playgrounds, that could help, which the overall emptiness is probably all due to the game's lore, which I briefly read into, so that could be it. Now I will say there are some problems I ran into that hopefully the devs addressed before releasing it in a 1.0. The first being the sound. There's nothing grossly offensive about the sound design itself, since everything really sounds how you'd expect it. The problem comes from everything trying to compete with everything else. You kind of get a taste of it when you load into the first level. All of the ambience and static objects generate their own sound, which, cool, whatever, that's what it's supposed to do. The problem is that everything is so loud that it can kind of ruin the effect, like when lights make a buzzing sound. That sound effect is more appropriate in the background than it is in the foreground, and can honestly drive you up the wall with how present it is because it's competing with everything else. Then when you get into firefights, the noise goes from loud to something Helen Keller can hear. The sound issue is fixable, and I wanted to highlight it so you don't blow out your eardrums if you end up diving in. The other issue I ran into was how absolutely dark this game is. Sure, that's probably the aesthetic they're aiming for, which cool, but you can find yourself in many places that are so pitch black that you have to use your night vision to see where you're going, which isn't a bad thing, but if you don't have any energy left, it could cause problems. Like, all this staircase needs is some lights and the issue is fixed. In the sewers, I'd expect it to be pitch black, but realistically, no one should be down here, but in places where people should be, it should be a little bit more lit. Those issues are fixable, and I only brought them up because I can't rightfully criticize anything else. Typically at the end of a video, I give my overall opinions on whether a title is good, bad, or accomplishes what it set out to do, and I'll also give a recommendation or tell you to stay away. Because it's in early access, I'm not going to tell you my final thoughts on it because they simply don't exist since the game isn't complete. There are fun and irritating things in the game, but until 1.0, anything I say really doesn't matter until it's complete. If I absolutely, gun to my head, had to give you a yes to buy it now or no, never touch it, I'd say play the demo and decide for yourself. Thank you for watching.